Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 18 of Ask the Howlers, our cybersecurity expert roundtable. Today, we have a couple guests joining us, but before I introduce them, I'll introduce myself. I am your host, Stacia Tympanick. I'm a staff solution engineer here with VMware Carbon Black. I'm going to pass it over to Andreano to introduce himself.
Hey everyone, I'm Andreano Lanusse. I'm a part of the VMware End User Computer Business Unit. I work on the technical marketing team as the UC staff architect, and I cover from Workspace One, integration, security, and Factors Gateway, a number of different topics around security and device management. Radash.
Yeah, hi everyone. Adarsh Kesari. I'm a solutions architect in end user computing as well. Focused predominantly on Windows 10 management, but really got a background in identity and access management, enterprise mobility management, and really that whole idea of the modern workplace and trying to enable line of business applications on any device.
Awesome. Thanks, guys, for joining us today. Today's episode, we're really going to focus on talking about remote work, as well as have a little focus on XDR and what VMware is doing to play in that space. For those of you that it's your first time joining, the way that this typically works is a very casual roundtable conversation where we bring up a couple different topics and our panel talks about each of them. Once we are done, we do want to let you know that this episode will be recorded. And if you're looking to subscribe for future episodes, you can go to carbonblack.com/ask-the-howlers to grab show notes as well as related resources. So let's kick things off, guys. You know, we're starting to see as the pandemic goes through the waves, if you will, throughout the globe, we're starting to see that some geos or regions are more restrictive than others when it comes to locking down. And with that being said, this is probably going to continue to fluctuate throughout 2021. So I'm going to just kick it over to you, Adarsh. What are the security implications or challenges that we now face because of this ever constantly changing situation?
Yeah, it's a good question. And it's one that's changed so much. And you're absolutely right. It's different places, different parts of the world of doing different things. And as a result, you've got potentially different restrictions wherever you are, different working policies. Like I'm in Australia at the moment, which is kind of mostly open, but every time we get 2 to 5 cases, they just decide to shut everything down. And so it does vary. We have like different states that are allowing people to come into offices, some that are not. From a security perspective, it really changes. Firstly, you don't really have boundaries around your physical office, where typically you'd have people travel in, come into an office, they'd be within the sort of 4 walls, so to speak, of an office. They would be on network in that particular moment in time. And then the moment they leave, we can treat them as a different employee. We can treat them with potentially 2-factor authentication being one option to break the barrier between, hey, this is someone working in an office versus someone who's not. Obviously now with a pandemic, with people working off sort of any device, whether the company owns it or not, whether it be a mobile device or a desktop device, all of those boundaries are now not very clear at all. And so what you're finding is we're going to have to think about security completely differently based upon various different trust levels, various different user personas, various different technologies that we have, and also the risk factors of the applications and services that we're using. So it has opened up all of these interesting sort of new conversations that are out there that we probably haven't had with customers in the past. We've always typically gone, hey, if you're in the office, this is what you do. If you're not in the office or a traveling employee or you're at a Starbucks, this is what you do. Now it's like, well, what if I am at home versus potentially in the office, flexible versus never in the office versus someone who's permanently there versus me being on a personal device? Do I treat them as different people? Do I treat them as different requirements? And it has just sort of changed that conversation that we really have.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that I feel like, to your point, now that people are physically outside of a perimeter, if you will, whether that be a firewall or something else, it's really changed the way that we're starting to see organizations think about security, right? And we're continuously hearing identity access access management and zero trust, even though they are those buzzwords, they're starting to become super prevalent in this industry. And I'm even hearing people coin the term that identity is the new security perimeter. So Andreano, I'm curious your thoughts on that, if you agree with that or disagree with that in terms of that, that idea.
I completely agree. I think that over time, we have been talking a lot of, like you said, about zero trust, but zero trust now is really, I think, the most prevalent word out there, because like what Adarsh said, so we don't have the perimeter anymore, right? So you're going to be working from home, maybe on your corporate device, or most of the time on your personal device, right? And a lot of companies, they were not prepared to allow employees to use their personal device to access corporate data. And then the conversation starts like, how do I protect the data now, right? How do I enable my employees to access those applications that are hosted internally, or even the applications that are hosted in SaaS that they need to continue doing their work? So you see a lot of companies before this whole pandemic talking about digital transformation, talking. And now over the past 9 months, you see a lot of those companies, they implemented things that they have been talking for the past 3 years. So they are accelerating this, right? And the zero trust, the whole architecture around networking is extremely key for all of this, right? If you look before as well, we were looking just to try to protect the identity of the user and look for what's going on the device specifically. The device data only is no longer enough anymore. Like you have to look more the data, what's going on around the network, around the threats that's happening, not just on your device, but devices that you connected with, and many other aspects, right? So things are becoming extremely complex, and us, like VMware, as one of the biggest vendor on the market on that, we are trying to simplify all of this, right? Really, because if we don't simplify all of these requirements, I can tell you, none of these companies are going to be able to implement those things in a time fashion in a very effective cost.
Yeah, what's interesting about zero trust that because there's always been elements of zero trust depending upon the applications and services the customers use. If you think about like sort of apps, I use Office 365 as a great example here. As companies started moving off on-prem Exchange, moving their email out to the cloud, they started realizing, well, we need to go do the same security mechanisms, albeit more modern, for our email that now sits out in a cloud repository. And so as companies have added more SaaS services, they've been able to add various different zero trust elements, whether it be different application security mechanisms to make sure that a smartphone has sort of separation between the corporate data and personal data, whether it be identity and access management to determine what level of security I want to go and apply. What we're now starting to see is also the same mechanisms being used for those traditionally on-prem applications. So things that where people were potentially connecting to a client server application that's not SaaS, that's internal, that's internally hosted. Well, we now need to use the same sort of principles for that and secure it the same way as we would do our SaaS first applications.
It's like the airplane is flying and you have to keep everything working perfectly and improve that airplane to the latest and greatest technology to keep supporting everything that's going on, right? There's one thing that is important as well. So I have been working in the past a lot of the international market with international customers. It's very different reality when you look the different countries, different regions, right? Like we are in the US, so we have the latest iPhone, we have everything first, right? But when you look like other regions, other countries, they are not on the same pace, right? And you have to be able to support those as well. So it's the global challenge, right? It's not just something that you release now, innovate, and everybody start using later. It's something that's happening across the board.
And VM was in such a weird position, a weird, unique position, if you want to think about it that way, because where Andreano and I come back from, we come from what was traditional AirWatch, right? We came from, we only care what's on a mobile phone and that's it, right? We want to know, we can deliver you your company email, but keep it away from your personal Facebook. That's where we came from. And that's one element of this. And when we sort of look at problems around zero trust security, we almost think of it as, well, what's residual data that's sitting on one of these devices? But the reality of it is there's so many different layers and VMware's got to play in each of them. And it's the integration of all of those layers that's actually quite exciting.
Yeah, and I think it's not even just making sure that the right person is accessing the right application and that they're authorized to do so, but then ensuring that those applications do not invite someone's scope to an entire environment. You know, I'm starting to see more and more people talk about kind of this SASE model where even if I do access this application, that doesn't mean that I can do a port scan and see everything that exists around me. And that's something that I think is going to continue to drive popularity in the market in terms of making sure that you're taking a step further. I always call it like we're all greedy to get zero trust, but then now I want my apps not to be able to talk to each other or give a user access or scope into an organization. So it's going to be interesting this year as we start to see more organizations take on these, you know, these projects really seriously and how well they go and what we learn as an industry by going in this direction. So with that being said, right, it's really good to understand. So this is what we're telling people, right? These are the things that we want to start to see them adopt with the new reality of today. I guess my question to you guys is, how should organizations manage access and identity as employees are going to be spending more time working remotely? Like, what does that actually look like? We talked about in theory, but what does that look like when I put hands on paper?
So I think the first part, and this is one that's sort of been around for a while, is generally speaking, most people, when they go identity and access management, the first thought is two-factor auth. Let's start with that. And then we'll go two factors now become MFA, right? Multi-factor auth. That's almost become the first starting point. A lot of the time when we talk to customers and they say, well, what are you doing around security for those line of business applications? They're like, yeah, we got multi-factor auth. That's fine. The reality of just doing multi-factor auth is it doesn't take into consideration, firstly, the user that's trying to access it, and then secondly, the device. So if I compromise that multi-factor auth credential, I can impersonate the user, assuming I have some other credential, but also I don't really know what device that user is coming in from. And that's kind of important. It's a message we've had sort of from the EUC side, where Andreano and I have done a bunch of VMworld sessions, really trying to prove that point and go, hey, I can try and access a line of business application from a device my company knows nothing about with just MFA. And in theory, the MFA solution goes, I'm good, let me in. The reality is then that user is on a device that's potentially a kiosk or some device that IT knows nothing about, doesn't have any sort of endpoint security on it, and all of a sudden you've got compromised data potentially. So it's the first thing is about having things like multi-factor auth integrated into your endpoint management platform. So that way you can make a smart decision. You can basically say, not only do I want to strengthen the authentication with the multi-factor, but I also want to make sure that I have some level of device compliance attached to this. And one of the big things from the Workspace ONE side is we do an integration within our product set with an identity and access management platform called Workspace ONE Access, and we can integrate that into third-party identity providers like an Okta, for example, out there. And what you could do is you can build in device compliance as an authentication method. So we would be, for example, on a Windows or a Mac device, would be issuing a certificate to the device. We can do a device compliance check as part of an authentication request. And then if you want to add multi-factor auth based upon your different considerations, you can add that as well. But at the very minimum, what that means is when a user tries to access an app, we're doing not only validating the user, we're also validating the device as part of it.
And adding to that is the traditional static approach to just look the device if like you have version, let's say Windows 10 build XYZ is just not enough today, right? When we talk about personal device, we talk about corporate devices and letting a lot of people from the personal perspective access those informations from the personal device, your identity access management need to have some type of dynamic evaluation of what the device is, right? Because I can, in a corporate device, I can define what's going to be the latest OS version that needs to be installed, what is the latest patch, what's the security status that needs to be available there. On a personal device, I may, most of the time I cannot do that unless I have some agreement with the employee and that touches in the private. privacy of the employee, right? If I can look something on their device, if I can configure things on their device and so on. So your identity access management need to be able to, in somehow, I would say, score your device, give some type of risk analysis on your device, and tell if your device is low risk for the organization to enable access to those internal resources. We have that in Workspace ONE Access today, leveraging Workspace ONE intelligence capabilities with risk analytics. And the most important that is we leverage machine learning to evaluate the devices. We are not looking for a static configuration that is imposed by IT, but we are comparing what is the highest standard across all the devices, the personal device or the corporate device, to define what's the normal, what's the baseline, right? And if we found some anomalies on those devices, then we score those devices as a medium or high risk score. What is the implication on that? So if I know there is a medium or high risk device trying to access the application, I can, on my dynamic policy, say, I need a second factor authentication, right? To ensure that the device is that device and the user is that user that is really trying to access those applications. And the other thing I would tie it here with threats, right? So ransomware is all over the place, right? The threats and everything happening today in the world is more than ever, right? So analysis on threats happening on device, protection of the endpoint is also extremely important, right? I can just go and tell, my corporate device, they all want to have carbon black, right? But not necessarily I'm going to be able to impose that on a personal device, right? I have to have this agreement with the user. And independent of what's going to be the tools that you use on your endpoint to protect them, I need to be able to look that information and perform some analysis as well to see what type of threats you are getting on devices. And this is one of the things that we do with the Trust Network at VMware, where we bring all the security partners of VMware integrating with Workspace ONE Intelligence so that we can analyze data from multiple different sources. And this helps to enrich our risk analytics with Workspace ONE Access.
Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to seeing, like, especially with something like Carbon Black and coming from the SBU unit, I'm really interested to see how we continue to build out the intrinsic security story, because for me, when I think about intrinsic, I think of being able to get lots of context through a single console. So for instance, I see an alert that happens on a device. As an incident responder, I might say, okay, what is this device? Where is it? How at risk is it? Right? And being able to just hover over device name and automatically give me like the workspace ONE information, the risk score, that additional context is where I'm looking forward to seeing Carbon Black and VMware continue to build that intrinsic security path so that people aren't surfing between consoles. They can get that context right from there because we know it, because we are VMware, if you will. But go ahead, Adarsh. Sorry, we keep
No. You actually picked up on the point.
Time, and I'm like, oh, I'm gonna jump on him again. Go ahead. Sorry.
No. You actually picked up on the point that I was trying to get to, which was, yes, it's all well and good that we should get all this information. You're absolutely right. It needs to go into the same console to make it really easy for an administrator. It also needs to be in a position where an administrator doesn't do as much work as they possibly need to for every single situation. So there are going to be certain situations that you're going to see is a little bit more common. They're going to come up a lot. Is the system going to learn itself to go triage and treat those particular problems by itself? Because the last thing you want is sending alerts to administrators. The next thing you know, they've got a flooded inbox, or their Slack messages are gone insane with all of these different alerts. So it's how do we make the right decisions dynamically, so let the system do it, and then let the administrator sort of go focus on the higher priority. That might not be the right way of putting it, but really those threats that potentially have not been seen before that may need some administrative overhead. And then, of course, Andreano and I have done this for a while. The number one problem we run into, especially around Workspace ONE, is more around end users. It's not that end users don't really like technology. I think if you go out and tell them that, hey, we're going to put this MDM software on your phone, and they're like, cool, no, thank you. So it's like, how do we go build some level of trust? How do we build that sort of, hey, we're going to do this on your device. It's going to make it more secure. So it's going to help us from an IT perspective. But what's in it for me as an end user? Yes, I get my apps, like whoop-de-doo, I can go to the app store and go get it myself. But how do I make that life a little bit more seamless? Okay, so I get seamless authentication. You don't have to type your password in every single time. How do we do things like single sign-on? How do we use the latest and greatest? Hey, if I'm using, Face ID on my iPhone, can I use Face ID for my applications? Can I integrate in with the native operating system stuff for my corporate apps that I would normally do on my personal app and make that experience a little bit better? So it's always been a bit of that sort of, hey, give us this and we'll give you these cool things as a result. It's all well and good to talk about the security stuff and the benefits that we get. It does take that sort of opt-in approach. And what we're seeing is quite successful is, yes, we're going to prompt you for MFA. We're going to prompt you for these things. We're going to, if we would prefer if you had some level of device oversight, whether it be AV, whether it be MDM, whether it be Workspace ONE is all part of this. But as part of getting that, you get a consistent app catalog, you get single sign-on access into your applications. You get it one single pane of glass where you don't have to go remember your links or go to your bookmarks. All of your apps are in one place. You get all of your notifications for all of the different services and systems all in one place. And that is sort of the value proposition that we go through around all of the different Workspace ONE integrations.
As more the user uses Workspace ONE, he just see the value right there, right? And the whole concern is about have something on the device becomes away as long as you are transparent, right? You have to be transparent in all of those things. This is like the basis of any BIO program. And I think with the situation that we are right now, this is accelerating because the whole bureaucracy is just getting removed, right? Because companies need to keep working, keep moving forward. And on the other side with IT, and I think that it's a great point to connect with the XDR, right? We talk here about risk analytics, we talk about identity, we talk about unified endpoint management, we talk about carbon black endpoint protection. This is basically the basis of the XDR. So the XDR is basically extending the sources of secure data that you have into a single repository where you're going to be able to look into that data, analyze, and take decisions from there. And we start doing that with Workspace ONE Intelligence, right? Today, we bring data from Carbon Black, from Access, from device, everything is there. And this is the source of that what you use for risk score, right? So VMware, we have SDBC, right? We have SD1. So we have pretty much everything that's going to enrich that to make that XDR solution beautiful, right? So it's a long path, it's a long journey, but the point is we already started that 2 years ago. We are just moving forward. And as more you rely on this type of solution, and they are cloud-based, they have to be cloud-based, right? There is no way for us to work with an XDR solution that's on-premise because we need to scale, we need to adapt fast. All the threats, everything's going on there. We need to be quickly releasing and working small iterations to make sure the customer is getting the benefit. And adopt a cloud solution in that sense is extremely important. It's going to be key because if you don't adopt and you keep it with your on-premise, you're just going to be behind, right? And you're taking more and more risks for your organization, for your users, for your corporate data. It's extremely important to have this important aspect, analyze this important aspect to start really considering cloud and SaaS solutions on as part of the organization.
This is all great stuff. And I think it's a good segue into, okay, so if we are going to start to integrate these tools together and get more context from our tools, I think it also warrants the fact that it's critical that teams start to play a little bit nicer with each other, right? And see cybersecurity as a team sport. So Andreano, I'll keep on with you in terms of, why is this so critical that teams get, work together well? What do you think the XDR role has, in terms of playing in this, kind of driving this narrative, if you will? How do you think it impacts that story?
Yeah, when we go and talk with customers, like especially those big enterprise customers, like you have one team that takes care of mobile, you have another team that takes care of desktop, another IT, another security. They are all over the place, and most of the time, communication is not ideal, right? It's not efficient from the email perspective. You call people. It's just like
Even from a VMware perspective, we have different people who talk to different sections of each of the customers, right? We could
yeah.
have 4 different VMware conversations happening at the same time with the customer about security across different areas, and they wouldn't know anything about each other.
We we as the vendors and all the other vendors, right? We need the responsibility here, which assume our responsibility on this. We need to make those tools super efficient to make that communication to flow across all the teams. So it's not just more like the mobile administrator is going to be using workspace on UEM, or VDI administrator is going to be using Horizon, the security guy uses Carbon Black. So we need to make all of them work together in those tools. That whatever tools we are building need to bring this all together. And the other important aspect here is not just about our tools, right? We know customers have their investment in other tools, right? There are partners or non-partners. We need to bring this together as well. We need to connect with those. We need to be agnostic in this case, right? Because it's not that one size fits all, or one vendor is gonna cover everything. So that is we need to have a seamless integration that with these partnerships, and we also need this. I think when we bring all of this together, this will help to streamline the communication, right? It's not also like when we talk about, oh, you can go in the console and see this. We need to be the other way around, right? When things happen, we go there and remediate. We do that today, but there are other things that need to get people decision involved, change management process, things like that. So we need to be proactive and communicate with all these teams, right? And that is also customer responsibility, right? Some process review, right? The way how you guys are working, a lot of those companies working today, that is a lot of bureaucracy out there, right? So they need to review this as well. It's like is a team effort between customers, vendors, and end users as well, right? So we are working on this. We have been working on this digital employee management experience and management, the DIN, where we are looking now the user experience. We are looking, instead to be asking for the user, how is everything on your device? Is everything working? Is apps crashing? No, we are taking data from the device and see when those fixes are happening and analyzing and say, okay, what's the score of my employee experience? So if that score is low, I have to go there and look, how can I improve? What's going on? What's wrong, right? So we as a vendor need to be notifying IT and give them the right information to take the right decisions faster and apply and keep people working, keep people happy.
Yeah, and the big thing with most organizations is they don't really want their employees. I mean, everyone's skilled labor, right? They don't want people working on the basic stuff. So if we can build a system that's going to get all of these analytics and get all of this information, going to process it, and then be able to make some decisions itself, whether it be around the user experience, whether it be around the security, and the system sort of self-remediates. I know that term gets overused a lot. If we can get the system to do that, we then free up resources in an organization to then go focus on sort of those higher order, those bigger problems that they have to sort of deal with. And that's sort of the aim here is like, well, how do we get some of this information that we feed from all of the different integrations, whether they be within the VMware stack or API integrations that we do into third parties, to then go make a decision set ultimately on what happens on an endpoint device.
Yeah, it's a great point. I mean, I think that one other thing I'll mention is that as we drive towards this is making sure that we're talking a common language, a common data format of some sort, so that when I go talk to folks that are infrastructure and they are focused in VMware, I can talk that language and we're not spending 5 minutes trying to get through, well, I call it a device, you might call it a unit or an asset or a cluster, and so making sure that even the nomenclature that we're using when we're talking through two different teams becomes unified and simplified. It seems like a basic thing, but it is very, very segmented right now, more than you believe.
There's a lot of beautiful names out there, and people are creating more and more names for meaning things that we have been knowing for a long time that doesn't need new names, right? And just make this communication more difficult. I completely agree with that.
Absolutely. All right, guys. Well, we have time for our bonus question. This is just something wild that I usually come up with. So this is my question. I will start with you first, Adarsh. Do you eat cereal? If you do you do milk first or cereal first?
I eat cereal very rarely, but it's cereal first, then milk.
Good. You're a normal human being.
Yeah, I was gonna
Andreano?
say, who does it the other way?
Uh-oh, we're about to see. Pressure's on. Andreano, what do you do?
Regarding cereal?
Yeah. Do you do milk first or cereal first?
I'm actually not eating cereal at all.
What about your son?
He's every day, every single day.
Is he a milk first or a cereal first, or does he not have those rights yet, those permissions?
No, he makes both and eats both together, so he doesn't do separate. Yeah.
I am also, yeah, I'm always cereal and milk, and I try to eat it very quickly because I'm not a soggy cereal person, but some people like to just let it sit in there, and that says something about a person if they let that happen.
I'm on a diet now, so I cut carbs since August, so, and I'm super happy with that. So cereal is just a killer.
It's off the list.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for taking the time today. Just to let our audience know, please join us for our next episode, which is episode 19. Again, you can register at the URL link carbonblack.com/ask-the-howlers. I'm
gonna steal a shameless plug afterwards.
Yes, of course, go.
No, shameless plug is for those of you who want to get a little bit more information around end user computing and everything that we do. VMware Tech Zone is the place to go. There's some phenomenal guides written out there. Andreano is one of the very many contributors that are adding all sorts of content across the variety of different Workspace ONE solution stacks. There's everything from product demonstrations if you know nothing about it and really want to learn, all the way through to reference architectures and technical deep dives and white papers. And then if you're one of the big trends in end user computing at the moment is around Windows 10 device management and trying to sort of move away from traditional SCCM-like management and use Workspace ONE. Myself and another gentleman, Brooks Pepin, we do a YouTube series sort of going through the basics of setting things up from basic. So we try and release an episode every week. Yeah, jump on. It's all of it's via VMware Tech Zone. That's the place to go.
Yeah. Awesome. Andreano, anything you want to plug?
No, yeah, just reinforce Tech Zone. So if you are technical, you really want to learn like how the product works, like the real hands-on, the real experience, the real use cases. Like we have a lot of content there in many different formats so that you can learn, and you can learn really across Workspace ONE, the entire stack. So that we talk about some things here, the integration with Carbon Black, right? So there's a lot of demonstrations there on how Workspace ONE Secure act in real life. So I strongly recommend just go there and take a look.
All right, great. Well, guys, thanks again for joining, and we'll see you next time on Ask the Howlers. Thanks, everyone.